What is up, guys? It is Uncle Freedom coming to you on another glorious and well-deserved day off here in the Midwest, where we have decided to yeet spring and summer back out into oblivion and go back to 34 degrees and raining, and fall is what it is. So today we're going to talk about defensive rifle ammunition. There is a massive mistruth in the gun community that you should never use a rifle for home defense because rifles over-penetrate and do things. I have news for you, and we're going to discuss why in this video. So if that sounds like fun and of interest to you and you're curious, go ahead and like, subscribe, tell a friend, share this video because we are growing, and for that I owe all of you a thank you. I still seeing numbers like 90-something% of the people that watch my videos are not subscribed. It doesn't cost you anything, so go ahead and click the subscribe button. It actually helps me out. I didn't understand that before I made a channel, but I do now. It helps me out, and I do appreciate it. Also, we have achieved a new unlocking achievement like a video game here. Yesterday, it was haters showing up in the comments, which pretty much confirms that I am doing something right. And now we have increased to the fact that I have been called a FUD. Maybe I don't know what the term FUD means anymore, but I'm fairly certain that the fact that I own dozens of black rifles would pretty much prevent me from being called a FUD. However, you would be wrong, because apparently anything built on a Block 1 platform is a FUD gun. So, holy shit, I'm getting old. Go over there and talk to my Mark 18 and tell it where the world hurt you. So when we look at rifle ammunition, the biggest misconception we have with it is that rifle ammunition is over-penetrating and it's going to cause more damage. It'll go right through the bad person, it'll go through the wall, it'll go through the other wall, it'll kill the dog, and it'll hit the neighbor across the street. That is not true. That is one of the reasons ammo selection is so important when we're talking about defensive platforms for firearms. I can't stress that enough, guys. The gun is a tool. All of that tool is designed around the fact that the little bitty tiny projectile that comes out of the end of it does what you need it to do. You could do that with pretty much anything as long as your ammo choices are where they're supposed to be. So we're going to look at my top 10 that I have personally tested through ballistic stealth, through barriers, and I have found to be perfectly adequate and sometimes exceedingly good at defensive things. So first up on that list is going to be a Hornady offering. This is the Hornady Critical Duty Rifle Ammunition, chambered for 223 pressure, so it's safe in any of your guns. I have never seen this not cycle a firearm from my shortest of shorts to my longest of longs. It always works and has been exceptionally consistent, especially when we're talking about sheetrock, wallboard, heavy clothing, or bare gel. It always delivers the goods, dumping all of its energy in a very short period of time, achieving about 9 to 11 inches of penetration. Not going to be a super deep penetrator, but then again, contrary to popular belief, most rifle ammos aren't. They're just not. Unless they're designed for penetration, they are not going to penetrate very well. They are going to dump energy, especially quick moving little boogers like a 5.56 AR platform. So on the Hornady Critical Defense, we're looking at 2,790 feet per second for the 73 grain variety, looking at 1,262 foot-pounds of energy. On the 55 grainer, we're looking at 3,240 feet per second with about 1,282 foot-pounds. Those numbers have been pretty accurate and consistent in all of my testing that I've done. You do lose some for barrel length and stuff, and that's going to be the same with almost all of these. However, that said, bare gel, heavy clothing, wallboard, sheetrock, consistently good performer, dumping all of its energy, not having an issue with it. I will say, though, that once you move into things like sheet metal and compound angle auto glass, this round ain't it. It has issues, and it comes apart and does things you don't want it to do. So much like your handgun ammunition, tailor it around what you expect your engagements to look like. So that is the Hornady Critical Defense AR round in 73 grain and 55 grain. So moving up to number 2 on my list, I don't have any of these here, I need to order some more, is the actual Ranger T 64 grain solid base. This is a very close performer to the federal bear claw load that was the FBI standard in 62 grain. It is a bonded soft point bullet that is just flat nasty. The solid base version of the 64 has a very thick, hard copper base to it. It is going to do excellent with straight line penetration, which again makes it exceedingly good at barriers. If you do not need the ability to hit auto glass or sheet metal and retain bullet performance, this is not the round for you. However, If that is somewhere you may see this go, it may be the option for you. Keep in mind, when I talk about these top 10 lists, I'm not talking about just your everyday average citizen. I'm talking about your concerned citizen that does not like where this country's headed and is concerned about what may happen next. So keep that in mind when I talk about my top 10. I know, right? I'm a cop. I'm not supposed to like that. That's not how my world works. I'm a huge Second Amendment advocate, and I think everybody that legally can own a firearm should own a firearm, and I think you should be able to carry it wherever you want. Just food for thought. So next up on that list is probably one of the coolest rounds I've seen, and I have begged Hornady to release the projectile so I can hand load it, and that is the Hornady Black 75 grain interlock SBR load. Now that SBR is actually very important, and you should, super important, pay attention to this. This round was not designed to fire from a 14, 5, 16, 18, or 20-inch barrel. It uses a very special proprietary blend of powders, which is the reason we can't get the projectile, that enables a full, almost complete full burn in a 10.3 to 11.5 barrel. I have shot it out of a 12.5. It did do okay, but much past that, even Hornady recommends please don't do it because you're not going to get the same pressure spikes that you would look for in a normal, setup for a 14.5 gun. So this stuff is going to achieve almost full burn. You're going to have very low flash signature, which, whether you know it or not, is very important, especially at night and in the dark. This round is a proven performer. Out of a 10.3-inch barrel, we have fired this and it defeats all FBI protocols, dumping all of its energy in a very short period of time, achieving optimal penetration of 12 to 16 inches, even through compound angle auto glass. This is a very, very, very cool round. This round right here is not all in the mail. You're looking at an 11.5-inch barrel, 2,321 feet per second at about 897 foot-pounds of energy. But I will tell you, the results on ballistic gel are flat devastating. So something to keep in mind, this is also a Hornady tap offering that is available to law enforcement, but much like most things should be, this is available to the good and American citizen out there, and you can pick this up as the Hornady Black 75 grain interlock SBR. No, there is not a version for a longer barrel, and I'm not happy about it either. So next up on that list for me is going to be a proven performer in most things, and that is the Speer Gold Dot. This is the 75 grain offering. It also is available in a 55. And with that, you're looking at 75 at 2,775 feet per second, 1,282 foot-pounds of energy. The 55 is moving 3220, going 1266 for the energy scale. Again, a proven performer, shot through all ballistics gel protocol for the FBI, and 12 to 16 inches of penetration, even through compound angle auto glass. It functions reliably in 10.3s all the way to 20-inch rifles. I have not seen it hiccup, and the velocities have been consistent no matter which barrel length I had. We didn't get weird velocity spikes that we seen on some stuff. This stuff has worked incredibly well, and it's a gold dot, so what should you expect? And you're going to see this exact projectile come up in just a few more minutes on another round that we're going to talk about. So that is the Speer Gold Dot round, and this is available in 5.56 and 2.23 pressures. Next up is going to be three very proven bullet designs, and that is going to be the 55 grain, 60 grain, 50 grain, 40 grain, VMAX, and soft points. Whether you get those from Nosler or Hornady, and you don't have to buy Hornady's ammunition, Hornady's Tap Urban is pretty much just VMAX or soft point loaded in the tap box. However, you can get Fiocchi. This is a Fiocchi offering in the 55 grain VMAX bullet, or 50 grain VMAX bullet right here. This guy is hauling out at 3,000 feet per second, producing 1,000 foot-pounds of energy. This is a devastating ass round on soft tissue. This is not a barrier round by any stretch of the word. Once you move into wallboard, you are no longer going to get the benefits of this. So think of heavy clothing or bear gel only for any of these varmint rounds. They are not designed to go through barriers. That said, they are an excellent choice if you're concerned about over-penetration in your home. You live in an apartment somewhere along there. This is an excellent performer for that. They do not carry a lot of ballistic energy once they go through wallboard. That said, they're not harmless, so please pick your shots, and actually judicious marksmanship is always appreciated. But these have been exceptionally good, and we run these at the department. This is the Tap Urban round, but you can also get the loading in Fiocchi, a bunch of other brands. You can get these It's a typical varmint bullet. So that is your 50 grainer there. We can move over to our 55. This is your 50 grain soft point. This is another Hornady tap urban right here. So we're looking at 3,230 feet per second, 1,158 foot-pounds of energy, and absolutely devastating on soft tissue, though not a barrier round at all. Please don't do it. And then one of my favorites, the 40 grain Varmageddon. Just like the vmax, super devastating on soft tissue, takes out coyotes in a single bound, takes out your random ground squirrel that you may see, and the bad guy that's a piece of shit that wants to steal things that he didn't work for. This will do it every single time. This stuff is moving though. The actual loading for this stuff is 3,650 feet per second out of an 18-inch barrel, doing 1,183 for foot-pounds of energy. This is a hand load. This is coming out at 4,000 feet per second. I don't recommend that. Burns out barrels. But super devastating and great. This is also a coyote round for me, but equally effective if shitbags come into your house. Now, if you wanted a good view on what something like this looks like, here is your 55 grainer, and that is actually your 55 grain projectile. Same deal. If we look at your 50 grain and we start talking about a soft point, there you go. Little bitty guys, but man, that is a super spicy 22 long rifle if you ask me. So next up is a frangible styled round. This is the Barnes MPG or multi-purpose green round, originally designed as a round that could do shoot houses and operate in hostage environments where low over-penetration is a no-go. It's a pretty stellar round. The bullet itself is super long. So this is a 55 grain projectile, and let's put that head to head with another 55 grain projectile. Much longer. Decent little hollow point on the end of this guy, but this is a compressed copper matrix bullet, not like the varmint grenade, which has a tendency of not doing what you want it to. This stuff achieves about 9 to 11 inches of penetration, which is ideal in an urban environment where over-penetration could be a problem. It does not function on any barrier at all. I don't give a shit if you hit thin wood paneling. This thing is coming apart. However, heavy clothing or bear gel, think thing without a shirt, excellent round. This is loaded up in some Starline nickel brass, and that a sexy freaking round. This guy is coming out at 2,950 feet per second, generating about 1,063 foot-pounds of energy on target. I've been impressed. It's also a sub-MOA accurate round. How they got a compressed copper matrix round to shoot sub-MOA for the bullet design, I don't know, but it has been exceptional for me. Next up, and I said we'd see this bullet again, is the Federal Fusion 62 grain hunting round. The reason I say the Federal Fusion hunting round is because Federal and Speer are, well, the same company. And that round looks a whole lot like your gold dot. I will also tell you, as shooting the original Bear Claw round from Federal against the Federal Fusion, the results are almost identical in tissue. Which tells me that the bonded 62 grain projectile that we saw in the Bear Claw round is very, very similar to the bonded 62 grain projectile we see in Federal Fusion 62 grainers. So food for thought. There's a piece of hunting ammunition you can find at most of your local big box stores. It's not going to be cheap, but most defensive ammo is not, and it is exceptionally good even through some of the intermediate barriers. Does not perform as well on auto glass as the Bear Claw load does, but the Bear Claw load has been discontinued. So moving on from that, we start talking about any loading at all with a solid copper projectile in it. We're talking about the Barnes TSX bullet, the TTSX bullet. We're talking about the CX bullet or the GMX bullet from Hornady, the E-tip bullet from Nosler. We are talking about solid copper matrix bullets that are going to expand, be very tough and durable, and focus a lot on penetration. With any of these rounds, you are going to see penetration about 12 to 16 inches, sometimes as much as 18 in ballistic gel, which does not equal 18 on human tissue. It is incredibly tough round. This will go through glass, it goes through wallboard, it goes through steel, it goes through plywood, it goes through heavy clothing. It does all of it. It functions much like critical duty does out of a handgun. That said, one of the loadings that exist out there, and unfortunately it usually can't be got by civilians, which I think is horseshit, maybe one day that'll change, is the Hornady 53 grain tap. So this is a polymer tipped for just like a critical duty would be, but it's a solid copper bullet. This guy is kind of a smoke show and it works pretty well. However, Remember I said this was only existing there. This is a Hornady Superformance CX. So that is the same bullet. It's just 55 grains instead of 63, and it doesn't have the tip. However, even through glass, it still does what it's supposed to do into gel, and it hits the protocol every time. It is a flippin' nasty round, and you're looking at 3,250 feet per second out of this guy right here. You can also do something like the Black Hills loading of the 55 grain TSX from Barnes. We're talking 3,240 feet per second, 1,282 foot-pounds of energy. The 55 grain E-tip from Nosler loaded up at 3,100 feet per second, doing 1,174 for energy. A solid copper bullet is a tough, reliable option, and I can tell you right now, if over-penetration is not what you're worried about, if you are worried about just a devastating workhorse of a round for whatever situation your brain has decided you need to have that for, solid copper and copper alloy bullets are going to be the order of the day. That is the reason the first mag in my gun in the truck is the 53 grain Tap Patrol. That is because that round is just effective and it works every single time. Also, if you've got people that like to hug trees and they're terrified of having anything lead in the environment, guess what? You're now environmentally friendly with a copper bullet. So moving on to the next one, it's kind of a weird one, and this is also on my handgun list. This is the Scott TUI. You can see that kind of crazy looking tip profile in here. These are solid copper spun bullets. So much like the GMX round, these just aren't designed to expand at all. They look like a full metal jacket, again, in an environment where you're not allowed to have expanding projectiles. Dumbest thing I've ever heard. This stuff is flat nasty. It destabilizes immediately when hitting a hydromedia of any kind and causes the round to flip incredibly violently into the tissue. We're looking at a 62 grainer, which this guy is, doing 3,200 feet per second at 1,410 foot-pounds of energy. The 55 grainer is moving even faster at 3,426 feet per second for 1,433 foot-pounds of energy. It's lower on my list, but I will tell you, if this is what I had loaded in my mags, I would not be undergunned any day of the week, and I would trust this to do what it's supposed to do. And it is 100% barrier blind because it does not depend on the round to actually expand. There's nothing to get clogged, and it's a solid copper bullet, so it's not going to get torn up. You hit bare gel with it, you're looking at 14 inches of penetration, give or take. You hit auto glass with it, and then hit heavy clothing, and then gel. You're still looking at 12 to 13 inches of penetration with a super nasty permanent wound track. You also think about stuff with a rifle. Speed is what rifles are made for. When you start talking about that, we're talking about hydrostatic shock. That is not a term that you get to use with handguns. I don't care what anybody's told you. There is not a handgun round coming out of a semi-automatic platform, with the exception of some super light loaded shit for 10 mil and 357 SIG, that has the velocity in order to create hydrostatic shock that would actually damage organs when it goes in. Hydrostatic shock, if you want a layman's term, is when you watch a ballistics gel video and it hits and you see this huge balloon where everything blows out. That is a temporary wound cavity caused by hydrostatic shock. That does not exist in the real world for a handgun. Handguns just don't have the speed. You need to be cruising closer to 18 to 2,000 feet per second, and you need to have some density to the bullet so that the bullet actually displaces media and causes more cavitation inside of the wound. This is a really good option for something like that because that is solely how this is to function and destroy soft tissue. Number 10 on this list, the least popular one as far as if you were going to do home defense, because it is not a reliable expansion or reliable in how it produces its actual terminal ballistics. That said, more often than not, it does work, and that is a match loading. So we're talking 68s from Hornady, 69 from Speer, 70s from Nosler, 73s from Hornady, 75s from Hornady, 77s from Nosler. Hollow point boat tails destabilize when they hit soft medium because of the hollow tip that's inside of them, where they drew the jacket up to make it more consistent and increase the ballistic coefficient, and the more solid base to it where most of the weight is, causing a destabilization. They flip and fragment inside of things pretty reliably. Even as low as a 10.3 inch barrel, you will get really nasty wound channels out of that. However, when you shoot something like that, there is always a risk of over penetration. These are not barrier blind rounds. They suck on steel, they suck on glass, they do okay through sheetrock and okay through plywood, though nowhere near as good as they could do. But when it comes to soft tissue, And heavy clothing, they are a rock star. And when we start talking about those two things, you're talking end of the world setup, precision engagement setup at 300 yards, because there's something going on in a place that shouldn't be happening at, and it's a threat to you. Well, except no substitute. It's just going to work. There are tons of companies that manufacture these. However, most of the time you're going to find Nosler, Hornady, and Sierra as the manufacturers of the bullets. Lots of companies load the actual ammunition itself. Pretty much a good standard to look at. A 68's doing about 2960 feet per second, 1,323 foot-pounds of energy. A 69 is doing about 2950 feet per second, 1,334. A 75 is doing about 2860 with 1,362. And the good standard for your 77 is 2,750 feet per second, doing 1,293 foot-pounds of energy. When we start talking about these bullets themselves, you look at something like this. So this is a 69 grain Sierra Match King factory load, and the actual projectile we're talking about in here is much, much longer. However, the good old standby for everybody is the 77 grain Mark 262 loaded by Black Hills Ammunition. Lots of companies do it, to include Sig Sauer, IMI. They're all the same bullet, just loaded by a different company. And when we start talking about a 77 grain projectile, we are talking about a much longer projectile. To put that in perspective for you, we're going to take a 50, where'd it go? We are going to take a 55 grain soft point and compare it head to head against that. That is a much, much longer projectile. The longest projectile that can be loaded at magazine length in an AR. Absolutely devastating, from 10.3 to 20 to 24-inch barrels. The faster you push it, the more devastating it is. The faster it goes, the less penetration you'll get. However, there is always the risk of over-penetration with this ammunition. There is always a risk that if you hit wallboard or something with it, it will not do what it's supposed to do, and it'll punch clean through what you hit, because it's just how that round works. It's already turning when it hits there. But usually if you hit clean or heavy clothing, even some lighter barrier stuff, you're not going to have an issue. It's going to be reliable in how it tumbles. You're going to be reliable in how it fragments. You're going to have these big, nasty 6 to 8 inch wide wound cavities that are permanent inside of things. It is an utterly devastating round. There's only one honorable mention for me here, and it is Federal's loading of the Nosler V-Shock round. It is kind of a game king round that you think about from Sierra. But in my testing, it's been pretty good. We're looking at 3,240 feet per second, 1,282 foot-pounds of energy, and it functions somewhere in between your Varmint bullets and kind of your copper projectiles. You get decent, or your fusion round. You're getting decent penetration, not as good as the fusion or the gold dot, but you're getting reliable, like nasty wound channels in between those two things. So not as deep of a penetrator, not as over penetration friendly. So that shit's going to fall somewhere in between. It can't over penetrate. It's not going to do as well through barriers or punch as deep, but all in all, a good round. And I like having those hunting round options available for people for self-defense, the good American folks that need to have a gun, because this world is uncertain and you're your own cavalry. So that said, guys, I am Uncle Freedom. Again, like and subscribe and tell a friend. Hopefully you found this informative, and stay tuned for my next one, my top 10 no-goes, which are probably going to have some of your shit hit the fan ammo on it. Just going to point that out way ahead of time. So guys, take care of yourself, take care of each other, like and subscribe, tell a friend. Until next time, I'll see you later.